Okay, so today's lesson is on the topic of plot. You hear that and you got to think the first thing. What in the world is plot? Well, why don't we get to that in just a minute? But if you're not paying attention to me now, you kind of need to focus in so that you're definitely with me. Okay? Plot. First of all, take a look at what is on screen right now. This is something that I'm going to come back to later. You can see me sort of drawing along the white line. I call this the plot roller coaster. If you look at it, you might even sort of notice that it looks like if you start here, it's kind of like a roller coaster. Just the white line is like one hill roller coaster. And that is basically correct, okay? So it's important for you to realize that that's what that's called, but I'm going to come back to it later. Why don't we start with this question? Mr. Franz, you're teaching a lesson about plot. So, or what are you talking about? Okay. Plot. What is it? Plot can be defined this way. It is the events that happen in a story and the order that they go in. So when you read a story like Percy Jackson or any book or story we've read, like Born Worker, like Dirk the Protector, like whatever it is, there is a plot. And the plot is the events that happen in a story and the order that they go in. If you look below, you will see that somebody took The Lightning Thief, which is the Percy Jackson book that we all read back in November, and they actually made a little comic strip out of it. And what they did was they used the parts of plot that I'm going to teach you today. So I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to use Percy Jackson and The Lightning Thief as an example today because we read that book, so I know that we're ready for that, okay? Take a look right now. What is the first part of a story or a plot, okay? The first part is called the exposition. Exposition is like the introduction to a story. It happens right at the beginning of the plot. It gives background information for the story. I'll tell you what, let's look bigger now, and that's about as big as I can make it. I don't know how big it is on your screen, but this is as big as I can make it for you, okay? Here is a picture of the exposition in The Lightning Thief. Actually, the description down below is the best part. It says, Percy is a kid who found trouble at school, who gets in trouble at school, learned that his dad is a Greek god, Poseidon, spoiler alert, and that he's a demigod. He goes to Camp Half-Blood to get away from the monsters, and his mother gets killed at the beginning, and he finds out that his best friend is his best friend's down here, is a satyr, okay? This is all at the beginning of the plot. It's right at the beginning of the book. It's right at the beginning of the story. It's called the exposition, and it means that it's like the start of the plot where they just give you some background information, okay? So number one is exposition. Number two is the conflict in the plot. And it means exactly what it says. A conflict has to happen to get the story going. In Percy Jackson, he obviously goes to Camp Half-Blood. Here's Luke, here's Grover, here's Annabeth, okay? And when he's there, he learns that someone stole Zeus's lightning bolt, the Master Bolt, actually. And since he's Poseidon's son, they blame him. And that conflict is what gets the story really going. It really gets the plot building, okay? So we started with some background information about Percy and his life. Then we got the conflict about the Master Bolt being stolen. First was exposition, second was the conflict. Well, what happens after the conflict? Well, then we go into the longest part, and listen to how I say this. The third part of plot is called the rising action, and I usually say it like that, rising action. I say it really slowly or long like that. Many events happen in the rising action that go up, and they build up to a very exciting battle or situation. Okay, that's going to come later. Rising action is the longest part of a story. It's the longest part of the plot. For Percy, he goes on his quest with Annabeth and Grover, and I'm going to name some of the events in the rising action of Lightning Thief. Okay, so they go on the bus and they fight the Furies. That's Mrs. Dodds. Then they go fight Medusa. That's another event in the rising action. By the way, I don't know if I'm going to do them all. Then they go to the St. Louis Arch and he jumps off after he fights a battle. Then they go to, then they see Ares and they go in the Tunnel of Love and it's really embarrassing. Then they go to the Las Vegas area and they go to the casino. Then they get out of the casino and go to California and they get trapped in Krusty's waterbed palace, I think it's called. Then they go to the underworld. And actually, that is all of the rising action. Every event builds up. And you can kind of feel as you read the book and as you read any story, the rising action makes you like excited to get to the most exciting part. Like some kind of final battle is coming or something like that. So after the rising action, what is the next part? Well, it's called this. Now, this is a word you might need to learn. It's called the climax of the story or the climax of the plot. The climax of the plot is the most exciting part of the story. It's like what you'll see in a minute when I show it to you again. It's like the top of the roller coaster. When you go up a big hill in a roller coaster and you get to the top and you're just about to fall off the top or go down the fall, basically, right? That is called the climax, and it's the most exciting part of the roller coaster. But in a book or in a story, the climax is the most exciting part of the story so far. For Percy, I think the climax is when they go to the underworld and they meet Hades and they tell him, "Give us back the Master Bolt." And he says, "I don't have it. You have it. It's in Percy's backpack." Spoiler, you guys, I hope you all read this book with us back in November. I'm spoiling the book big time. And so, they go, "You have it." Okay? And that was a very exciting moment. And everything that we read was building up to that big moment. Okay? So that was the climax of that book. What happens after the climax? You know what? It's just like a roller coaster. What happens after you go up the hill? Well, you fall. And in our plot, it's called the falling action. After the climax, in a story now, not a roller coaster now, an actual story, a bunch of exciting things happen and the conflicts get resolved. For Percy, they get out of the underworld and he has to fight Ares during the falling action. And he actually kind of wins, right? He defeats Ares and he returns the helm back to Hades, and he actually returns the Master Bolt back to Zeus, I guess. Okay? So in a plot, everything builds up to the climax, then you have what's called the falling action, and then you think, is that it? Is that the whole story? Look, that's Ares. Isn't that the end of the book? No. There's one more thing that every plot really has to have, and that is the resolution. Resolution basically means the ending to the story. After the falling action, you have to have the resolution, which means the ending. Everything is done and over for that story. Sometimes it's a happily ever after, but sometimes not. Look what happened to poor Percy, right? You guys remember that. He goes back to camp, and, that's right, of course. Luke tells him, "I'm the lightning thief. I stole the bolt. I work for a bad guy named Kronos. And by the way, Percy, I'm going to kill you." Is that okay? He doesn't kill him, I know, because obviously Percy gets away. But that is what happens in the resolution. And then I guess Percy goes home, right? I mean, I remember that stuff too, but I didn't put it up here in the comic. Okay? So these are some of the things, of course. That's just an example of Percy Jackson. Why don't you look again, watch, at the plot roller coaster. Take a look right here. When you go on a roller coaster, it is the same, as a story. You begin down here, okay? And in a plot of a story, they give you the exposition. They just introduce things. Then it begins to build up, just like going up a hill in a roller coaster. And you have a conflict, some kind of problem or struggle or fight or problem that the main character has to realize is a big problem and deal with. Then you have a bunch of events building up, just like when you go up a roller coaster. Actually, when you're on a roller coaster, they have this chain that sort of pulls you up, and it goes like this. I'll sort of imitate it. Ching, 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 ching. You kind of hear it going ching, 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 pulling you up and up and up. Well, all of the events in the rising action are just like that. They pull you up, 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 all the way to here. Whoops, take a look right here. All the way to the climax of the story. And on a roller coaster, it's the top of that hill. When you get to the climax, that would be a terrible spot to stop. You'd be stuck up there, right? You have to explain what happens, and then very, very quickly, there's a bunch of quick events in a story called the falling action, just like when you fall in a roller coaster. Okay, so the climax is very exciting, but so is the falling action, because it's like all the stuff starts happening really quickly. And then, of course, you don't stop here, just like a roller coaster. If a roller coaster stops at the bottom of the hill, everybody gets killed. You have to, and in a story, it would be too sudden. You have to have a resolution at the end of your story. That is like the ending to the story. So this is called the plot roller coaster. Well, that's what I call it. And it shows how the events in a story are sort of put in a certain order that will make the story very interesting and make the story very exciting. And we're going to be using that this week, and I think a little bit next week too, as we look at a plot of a certain story, okay?